Slam Time, Wrestle Talk with Attitude. Hosted by yours truly, Big Rob.
What's going on, everyone? It's your man, Big Rob. Slam Time Wrestle Talk with Attitude. Today we're going to discuss Travis Scott and his involvement and his role in some of the biggest storylines in the WWE. Let's go, baby. All right, everybody. First off, before we get into the Travis Scott stuff and his involvement in the WWE, I want to take a minute to introduce myself. Everyone, my friends, my family, my inner circle, they all call me Big Rob. That's not a name that I gave myself. That's what everybody calls me. I don't know. They tell me my personality's big. That's why I go by Big Rob. It's my X handle. So, Big Rob. Regarding pro wrestling, I've been a fan and I've loved this business for 35 years. I started watching it in the late 80s with my older brother. I was a huge Hulkamaniac into the New Generation era with Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, into the Attitude Era with Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, all those guys, into the generation with Orton, Cena, now Roman Reigns, CM Punk, all those guys. I wanted to start creating content because I feel I can provide great insight into this business and my thoughts on what I think, works and what doesn't work. So with that, I want to introduce myself to the internet wrestling community. I want to start communicating with you guys. Again, I want to start creating content, and I want to interact, man. That's the goal. Besides being, a huge fan of professional wrestling, I am a husband. I am a father to 3 children. My wife, you'll probably eventually see her on this. We'll probably do a video together at some point. She's a pro wrestling fan as well. She watches every show with me. So that's just a little background. Get to know me. Like to get to know all of you out in Twitter X world, internet wrestling community. Whether you hate me, love me, I'll always be Big Rob at the end of the day. All right, guys. Since all that nonsense is out of the way, and I gave you a little insight on who I am and what I do, let's get rolling. Travis Scott, baby. So I fully understand that the pro wrestling business, specifically WWE, has always been an entertainment business. Listen to Vincent Kennedy McMahon 35 years ago, talking about how he's not a pro wrestling company, he's an entertainment, entity. And you look back through the history of the WWE, you go back to the days of Gorilla Monsoon, facing off against Muhammad Ali, rolling into WrestleMania 1 with, Mr. T in the main event, Cyndi Lauper being a massive part of the beginnings of WWE and the growth that, it saw at that time. Going into WrestleMania 3, Jake Roberts with Alice Cooper, the British Bulldogs, Ozzy Osbourne. You get Lawrence Taylor in the main event of WrestleMania 11, WrestleMania 14, Mike Tyson single-handedly, along with Stone Cold Steve Austin, saves the WWE, WWF at the time. They were a sinking ship. Mike Tyson, the biggest celebrity outside celebrity in the history of the business, in my opinion. Fast forward, you get, people like Snooki involved in a WrestleMania match. You get, I was gonna say Ronda Rousey, but she was an athlete. But you see the trend here. It's always been about entertainment. It's always been, being in the mainstream. WWE's always been on the cutting edge of that. I mean, even, you look at like the WWE Network initially, streaming. WWE were the first entity to, make that happen. And it was a massive success that, these other, companies followed. Now, let me say, so I do feel different about Travis Scott in the situation that he's in. You look at the high profile story that he's involved in with John Cena, getting involved in the main event of WrestleMania. Now it looks like we're moving towards a match at Money in the Bank, or that's been reported on the internet, so who knows if that's even true. But it's looking like maybe John Cena and Travis Scott versus Cody Rhodes, and who knows, he needs a partner. If he's teaming up with John Cena, Cody Rhodes needs a partner. I will say about Travis Scott, I am a 36-year-old man. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I have never once heard a Travis Scott song. I heard the name before, but I'm not in the loop. On the other hand, my 15-year-old daughter's probably heard every song. So they are, trying to get, younger people involved, trying to get that younger audience, trying to get younger eyeballs on the product, which I respect and I'm for 100%. But with Travis Scott, the situation needs to be in a side role. Having him in the main event of WrestleMania, having him in the main event of a pay-per-view or a premium live event like Money in the Bank just doesn't fly for me. With that, I know, all right, for instance, you look at Mr. T being involved in WrestleMania 1. Totally different situation. At that point, WWE, WWF wasn't in the stratosphere of where it's at today. If you look at the 80s, Mr. T, Hulk Hogan, two of the biggest stars in that era. WWE was trying to launch. They were trying to go from here to here. They needed him in the main event of WrestleMania. They needed to sell out Madison Square Garden. They needed to have all the eyeballs on that event. And it worked. It was a major success. It launched WWE into the golden era. So it's not the same to me. Mr. T was needed. All right, fast forward to WrestleMania 11 with Lawrence Taylor. The business was down. Extremely down. Vince McMahon, trying to get, garner attention, brought Lawrence Taylor in, main evented WrestleMania. But the difference between Travis Scott and Lawrence Taylor is that Lawrence Taylor may be not one of, but maybe the greatest athlete of all time. And at that time, I don't know which year WrestleMania 11 was. I think 94, 95. I think it was 95, possibly. Lawrence Taylor was still peak condition at that time. He was a massive name. Was still athletic as hell. And, they shot for the stars with LT. Didn't work out, But if you go back, the match wasn't that bad. Fast forward to Mike Tyson. Same situation. The WWE was struggling, as we all know, as we keep hearing over and over and over again. The Monday Night Wars, WCW, was taking it to McMahon. They were whipping his butt. They were killing him in the ratings, 82 weeks. We all know the story. It's been played over 1,000 times. They had a massive star in Stone Cold Steve Austin that they were trying to launch to the next level. How do you do that? You take the most controversial person in the year of 1998, 1997, Mike Tyson coming off the earbutting incident with Evander Holyfield, barred from boxing, genius. Bring him into WrestleMania. Have him align with Shawn Michaels, Triple H, China, DX, and have him as part of the main event. It worked, man. Different situation. WWE was now here trying to get up here. Mike Tyson was that guy that did that for them. Different situation. You look at the Travis Scott situation. The WWE's rolling. They're rolling. They're hitting peaks that they've never hit before. You didn't need Travis Scott in the main event of WrestleMania. You don't need Travis Scott in the main event of Money in the Bank. And I think the thing that upsets a lot of people is that there is so much talent on this roster that I think a lot of the outrage comes down to is you don't need Travis Scott in the main event. Do we want Travis Scott on the show? Is he beneficial to, the success of WWE, getting more eyeballs, drawing the younger audience and crowd? Absolutely, 100%. I think we can all agree with that. But my beef, you have an absolute legend like John Cena retiring at the end of 2025. Turns heel for the first time in his career. Obviously, we had Thugonomics. I'm talking about the John Cena as we know him. We have Cody Rhodes, who's walking into WrestleMania, the WWE champion. It's been champion for over a year. That's all the story you need, man. You have a legend that turned bad guy going against a white meat babyface in Cody Rhodes. There were so many different ways to get to the ending of that match that did not involve Travis Scott. It wasn't necessary. John Cena, Cody Rhodes, you look at the match Cena just had with Orton. That was 10 times better than the match at WrestleMania. Because you had two legends in the ring. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that went on, smoke and mirrors at the end, but it was a great pro wrestling match that entertained the fans. We didn't need Travis Scott in the main event of WrestleMania. And now the reports are coming out that in an event like Money in the Bank, we're potentially getting a tag team match with Travis Scott teaming up with John Cena to go against Cody Rhodes and a mystery partner. That's a whole nother conversation. If that's the case, who's Cody's partner? Who knows? But if you look at an event like Money in the Bank, perfect opportunity. 14 years ago in Chicago, we had CM Punk versus John Cena in one of the most memorable title matches of all time. Run that back as the main event. We don't need Travis Scott to elevate this business. It's already elevated. Can he bring more eyeballs to it? Yes. And I think the other issue that people have with Travis Scott is you took a guy in Cody Rhodes who has conquered the odds, has fought from the bottom, left the company, came back, fought his way to the top, and he gets distracted by a guy, who's not a pro wrestler, Travis Scott, and he loses the world championship in the main event of WrestleMania. It just rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. If you wanted to have Travis Scott, sucker punching The Miz, or beating The Miz up, that's fine, man. No need to involve him in the main event of WrestleMania. No need, to involve him in the main event of Money in the Bank. Put the guys who are in that ladder match. If you don't want to have Cena in the main event, use the ladder match as the main event. But I think a lot of people got rubbed the wrong way and feel like you buried Cody by letting a guy like Travis Scott, cost him the match, made him look like an idiot. Bottom line. I'm just concerned that the WWE is trying too hard to be in the mainstream. Kenny Omega came out the other day and said eventually he thinks, the main event of WrestleMania is going to be Mr. Beast versus Logan Paul. Logan Paul's a hell of a professional wrestler, but he's not too far off on what he's saying. I'm concerned that TKO, wants to clip. I mean, listen, you don't see, Travis Scott getting in the UFC, fighting, Israel Adesanya. You don't see that. It's not needed, man. The business is already elevated. And listen, I debate with people on Twitter and X all the time. Yes, Travis Scott's needed. He deserved to be in that spot in the main event of Mania. Let me know, man. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm putting this content out. I want to get your thoughts. But as somebody who's been around the business, and watched this business for a long time, see how they utilize celebrities and big names, it just didn't fit where it was put, man. So with that, hopefully, we don't get him in the main event of Money in the Bank. Sure, that's probably going to happen. Comment below. Let me know what you guys think. Again, I'm new to this. I'm working on the audio. I'm working on the video. I'm trying to get it all online for you guys so you have something good to watch. Let me know. What are your thoughts on Travis Scott? Does he belong where he's at? Does he belong in the main stories of the WWE? I do not think that, but maybe you do. Let me know. All right, guys. This episode of Slam Time Wrestle. I'm Big Rob. Thanks.
Slam Time. Wrestle talk with attitude.